And we're gonna start now. Guys, hello, Jerry. Welcome.
Hello, Barak. Nice to be invited to this. Thank you.
I don't see you,
Okay,
so
guys, I'm just going to say that uh, I freeze all the time and I have to redo my video, so that's going to happen the whole time. I don't know why it's doing it, but
and my role is to be a nudnik. We discussed it. Jerry knows what a nudnik is. He said that it was used. It was called a nudnik before. So
many times.
but but my role is to be a nudnik and remind Jerry from time to time that we lost his image. Okay. I wanted to start our conversation before starting our conversation. I want to start with a piece, with a song that Jerry wrote, and Jerry chose this one. It's called Gabriella, and then we'll ask him a little bit about that.
Thank
And we're back.
Yes.
So, Jerry, why did you choose this song to begin?
Well, I never listen to myself because I mentioned that before. Because I'm playing gigs all the time. I listen to myself practice, and I don't have any CDs of me around the house. I give them away. So I wrote that tune for my daughter, and I felt, like it was a good representation of being operatic or vocal. So that's why I chose that one.
Nice. And when I saw you playing at the lily pad many times during my stay in Cambridge, you played a lot of standards.
Yes.
Um, But usually, in many of your recording, you play like originals. So do you like playing standards or no? Or
I
what's
love
your
playing standards. I just assume play standards than anything. Um, yeah, I love playing standards because I feel free on them, or freer. Uh, I grew up listening to standards. I listened to vocalists all the time. When I grew up, all we listened to was in my house with Frank Sinatra, Dinah Washington, Ray Charles, and people who sang standards, and Nancy Wilson, Carmen McRae. Uh, so, yeah, I love standards. Love playing them. I love reharmonizing them. It's great.
yeah, you we were talking when we listened to your the community. We listened to your last album, Nearly Blue. You're reharmonizing most all of the standards, like either changing tempo or chord progression or
Yeah.
why?
Well, having grown up listening to such fantastic people play these standards, you want to do something a little different. So, but you want to keep the integrity of the song, but just change it a little bit and make it interesting for you and the listener. And I, I do it that way. It's funny. What happened was, as a exercise, I reharmonized a whole bunch of standards and went in the recording studio and just threw them down on tape with Joey Calderazzo, Adam Nussbaum, and Dave Santoro. And Calderazzo brought that to Blue Note, and they put it out. I never even knew that was going to be a record. But so at that point, I just started reharmonizing standards, and it's just been a novelty for me.
Nice. Um, let's talk a little bit about your origin story. I mean, how did you first get involved in playing the saxophone, and what made you start your interest in jazz in general?
Well, um, one day, a person came to the school. I was 8 years old, and from the a music department in Watertown, Massachusetts, and they played the lowest note on the one of the lowest notes and a very high note on the piano. And they said, "Well, was the second note higher or lower than the first?" And 50% of us got it correct, and they said we were musically gifted. Of course, they said, "Well, what instrument you want to play?" And I said, "I want to play the trumpet." The trumpet. They said, "No, no, no. According to this test, you need to play the clarinet because they need clarinet players for their marching band." So, but my uncle, who lived and I lived in an apartment building, he lived a floor up from me, and he was a jazz musician. He played trombone, guitar, and bass. His name was Sparky Tomasetti, and right from the get-go, at 8 years old, I started listening to Count Basie with Lester Young, Duke Ellington records and things like that. Then I got a couple of small band records, and I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, but when I was in the eighth grade, a friend of mine came over. I think I was 13, and he came over. His father was a trumpet player, and he came over with a Miles Davis record with Coltrane. I think it was Steeman, and then he also had a Art Blakey record with Wayne Shorter and Lee Morgan, Night in Tunisia. and Sonny Rollins record, Sonny and Brass. And when I heard those records, I just, oh my God, I used to go to Harvard Square every other week and just buy LPs and listen to them and play along with them.
I forgot to mention that you're originally from Boston.
Yes, I'm from Boston.
And who initially influenced you, like musicians, as mentor or as a young playing growing up?
Well, the great thing about uh, I studied in the 10th grade. I studied with Joe Viola from Berkeley, 11th grade, 12th grade. I was in John LaPorta's youth band in the greater Boston area. But I used to go to the jazz workshop all the time and hear Coltrane and hear Miles Davis or Cannonball or Art Blakey with Wayne Shorter, Lee Morgan, Art Blakey with Freddie Hubbard, Lee Morgan, Curtis Fuller. Wayne Shorter, Freddie and Curtis Fuller and Jimmy Merritt. And, and and I got an opportunity to see so many great players play. I mean, and meeting musicians along the way and practicing, and I it just felt normal to me. It was a great situation for me. Um, but no different than what people experience today. They go see the people who were playing in clubs. That's what I did, but at a young age. So
But after your time at the university, you went to Boston, to New York.
yeah, I went to Lowell State Teachers College, which was in Lowell, Massachusetts, because I couldn't afford Berkeley. And Berkeley wasn't given any scholarships, even though I was studying with Joe Viola and I was in John LaPorta's youth band, featured soloist. But so I went 1 year to Berkeley, but I graduated Lowell State Teachers College. Then I played bass gigs for about 2 years after I graduated, behind strippers and until I saved up enough money and I moved to New York City. I moved in with Harvey S. His name was Harvey Schwartz at the time. Greatest thing that ever happened to me because everybody would call him up and say, uh, he'd say, "Hey, Harvey," he was working with Lee Konitz and everybody else, and they'd say, he said, "Oh, you need a tenor player? You need a tenor player?" So he was hooking me up. It was great. We'd play sessions, and yeah, it was awesome.
Harvey S. was a bass player.
Yeah, Harvey S. is bass player. Sorry.
So these years in New York, in what way they were like pivotal to your development?
Well, when I moved in with Harvey, we lived in Queens, and I'd go into Manhattan, and we had a steady gig at the Mercer Arts Center every weekend. But then when I moved in New York, I moved right on Sixth Avenue, 821 Sixth Avenue or 819, one or the other, with Art Barron, who was on the road with Duke Ellington's band, and it was $75 each for rent, and you could play music 24 hours a day, any day. So that was huge. Then I moved right around the corner on Sixth Avenue, so there were loft sessions. We played every day. One day, Mike Brecker lived down in 17th. Sometimes I go practice with him. Sometimes Bob Berg would come by or Steve Grossman. Uh, and then Lovano moved to town with Billy Drews, Steve Slagle, and you tell one guy, "Oh, we're having a session today," and everybody would show up because they would tell somebody else. So it was just playing a lot.
So is it like the importance of playing with your peers, like with the other
Yeah,
people?
it was exactly that, playing with your peers and seeing what they were doing and having. I remember practicing stuff and I thought, "Oh, this doesn't sound good." And they'd come up and say, "Hey, man, what was that stuff you were playing?" And they'd motivate you to keep going in that direction. So yeah, it was very helpful. and and then I moved back to Boston. And the difference when I moved back to Boston, even though the level wasn't as high, I was playing gigs at little jazz clubs like the Sunflower, the 1369, Michael's Pub, all these little joints in Boston that they had because the drinking age was 18. So as soon as the drinking age went back up to 21, all the jazz clubs closed again, you know. But because the kids would go out and listen to jazz and have a beer and whatever. But yes, just a different kind of. So it's a different mentality. Instead of practicing, you're playing for a live audience. It's a different headspace.
Now, my turn to be a nudnik,
Yeah,
and
please.
so restart
Okay.
your video. So would you suggest to young musicians these days who want to be like professionals, would you suggest that they would go to New York?
I was having this conversation the other day, and it's it's in this day and age, it's hard for me to say because I know so many musicians who move to New York. Well, the great thing about it, I would say yes, absolutely, move to New York because that way, even if you live there for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, you can say, yeah, I lived in New York, and you know what it's like, and you know what you were missing or not missing. So yeah, it's a great thing. But in other ways, I say move to Europe, where they give. I've been going to Europe since 1973, and I'm talking about 100 days a year. First with Brubeck in 73, 74, 70, but later on with, and I've never been over there where their government somehow isn't paying for me to be there. They subsidize their jazz clubs, their jazz societies, their jazz festivals. Uh, so that's another alternative.
Do you think there's a difference between the European audience and the American audience in your
Yes,
experience?
I do. Um, and now this is just my opinion. So, when you go to Europe and you play a jazz club, regular people go listen to jazz. They grow up going. You go into a hotel and they're playing Dexter Gordon or Miles Davis. That doesn't happen in the United States. Or you go into a restaurant and they're playing jazz. But in this country or in Europe, regular people go hear jazz concerts, classical concerts, rock concerts. They go to art museums. Over here, the only people that go to jazz concerts are jazz musicians.
Yeah. You mentioned that you started touring with Brubeck in '73, and you did
Yes.
that in from '73 to '75, I think, and then later
73,
on.
74, 75, and then I had 3 years off. Then it was 79, 80, and 81.
So how did it happen? How did Brubeck invite you to play with him?
Well, the first time I had been playing with Darius Brubeck with an avant-garde clarinet player in Boston. So when I moved to New York, Darius gave me a call and said, Dave wants me to have Dave's having me join him on the road with my group. I'd like you to join my group. So we'd go on and play the first set. Dave's trio would play the second set. We'd go on and play 3 or 4 encores. And then after 3 years off, Dave called me up and said, "Yeah, I want to start a new quartet. I want you to be a saxophone player." And after 3 years, I decided that it was time for me to leave. But it's a great experience. We played all over the world, on to Australia 3 times, New Zealand 3 times, every country in every state in the 50 states in the United States, all over Europe, Hong Kong.
So basically, you took the chair of Paul Desmond, and of
No,
course,
I
you
took
did.
uh, I took Jerry Mulligan because Jerry Mulligan was after Paul Desmond.
Right.
But I got a chance to play a lot of gigs with Paul Desmond and Jerry Mulligan. Sometimes both, but mostly one or the other, because the promoter would say, "Hey man, we don't want your group. We want Paul Desmond or we want Jerry Mulligan." So I get a chance to play with them too.
the audience, of course, like you said, the audience expected like the sound of Paul Desmond, and of course, your sound is not very
No,
similar. So, was it a daunting task to?
you
Was
know,
it?
Dave Brubeck never once told me how to play. And I'm a huge, I used to see when I was a kid, I'd go see Brubeck play with Paul Desmond. I love the way Paul Desmond plays. I love everything about him, even as a human being. But, you know, that's not the way I play. And and I'm glad I didn't because you can't, if I tried to play like Paul Desmond, I'd never be good enough because nobody plays that good, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody could play that style like Paul does. So fortunately, I played different. So they and Dave, when I was playing, Dave would look at me. The audience didn't know if was good or bad. So he would look at me while he's playing and he's smiling. So the audience would see him smile and they think, well, he can't be that bad. Dave's smiling.
I had this conversation with a colleague of mine, with Raz, that is right here listening to us, about the technical aspect of playing the saxophone. Is it necessary to be very, very being able technically? And Paul Desmond was not very technical, I think. So
Well,
what do you think?
I'm going to tell you a story. So I'm on this jazz cruise going to the Bahamas and Nassau and then back to New York City. It originated in New York, and Paul Desmond is on it. So I played the first set, and Paul plays the second set, and then we go on. We play four numbers together. But after I got off my set, he said, "Wow!" He said, "Man, where did you get all those chops?" And of course, at the time, that's all I did was practice all day. So Paul said, and I quote, you know, at a young age, I realized I hated to practice and I had to develop a style that I didn't need a lot of chops. But that's very misleading because he has all the technique needs to play Paul Desmond. It's perfect.
Um,
You know,
um,
Paul Desmond wasn't his original name.
no, but please unfreeze
Oh, okay.
your video.
Yeah, Desmond, I forget his. He had a Jewish name, and he said, "Oh man, I can't have a Jewish name and be in this music." So he went in the phone book and he went down and saw all these. He says, "I think I'll take this name, Desmond."
It's an option.
Yeah. Well, at the time, you know.
So you were, when you played with Brubeck, you were playing like 200 nights a year or something like that, you
I was
told
on
me?
the road 200 days a year, but we only played, you know, a lot of days would be off, 110 concerts a year.
And that, of course, helped you to develop your voice and
Well, yeah, it. I got to, you know, even playing in a situation where that wasn't the style, I introduced that style to Dave's music, and he liked me for it. He liked the fact that he thought I was. He used to say, "Wow, you really stretch out." So he liked the fact that I did that, that I wasn't conservative.
one thing I remember is that Dave Brubeck's audience was not the typical jazz audience, was it
Not
not?
a, you know, with 6 years with Dave Brubeck, I didn't meet one jazz promoter, one club owner, one jazz festival guy, one record producer. I never met anybody. You're in a Brubeck bubble. That's all they talk about is Brubeck, and I'm not complaining, believe me. But you're right. It's not a jazz audience. It's a it's a Brubeck audience, and he was remarkable at marketing his product. He was on the cover of Time magazine, and but he wasn't a typical. Yeah, he brought jazz to Middle America, watered down version, so they could uh, not the not the hard core stuff, but you know, another version of jazz to Middle America.
But still, you didn't water down your
No,
style of playing.
I just played.
That's optimistic to know.
And you know, I say he watered it down, but to him, he probably didn't. That's just the way he played.
Right. And then you came back to Boston
I came back to Boston. Yeah.
and basically started, playing and teaching, right?
Yes. I decided that instead of playing all these gigs that I didn't want to play, I was going to teach and just play the gigs I wanted to play, and that was the way it was going to work.
So one of my friends, Yair Spiegel, and I'm not sure that he's here, wanted to ask you this about studying the jazz. In the old time, everybody, you know, learned how to play jazz by listening to albums, to records, and But today you have different options. You can go to music schools. You can get like private tutoring. You can listen to YouTube. What's the way to learn jazz these days, in your opinion?
Well, I'll give you my Zen answer. Any way you can. All of the above. You know, when I was young, I tried to get people to teach jazz. Nobody taught jazz. I remember calling up Wayne Shorter. I remember asking so and so. They didn't. They said just learn tunes and listen to records. Learn tunes and listen to records. So that's what I did. I played along with records all day long, and I learned you know, what part of the solos I could. Sometimes, if it was beyond me, I would put it on my reel to reel and slow at half speed and then transcribe it. You know, if it was like man, I'm not getting this. You know, but yeah, but today it's a different world. There's you've and they have so many jazz schools out there with great jazz teachers. The codes are broken. You know, everybody knows everything today. You know, these kids come in, they at New England Conservatory, they can play giant steps backwards and, you know, 14, 13 or whatever, you know, or 13, 14. It's like, but it's a different world.
Yeah, there's a flood of information at
Yes,
the
information
fingertips
is
of.
here.
But do you think it's a good thing for a student, for a music student to have, or does it, sometimes
You know,
hurt?
I probably could say all the things that we think. Yeah, if you're real musical, it's going to help. And if you're not that musical, maybe it's going to be a hindrance. John Laporta would say to somebody, said, "Man, I got some good news and some bad news about your playing." He said, "The good news is you've got a lot of chops, and the bad news is you've got a lot of chops." So yeah, I get it. So, but I think it's great that people are studying music and art because the world has become so materialistic. You know, so materialistic, and it's great to have musicians just balancing, you know, the other side of the coin and doing something that's, you know, is spiritual.
Right? But don't you think that there are? I find that there are many musicians that, like young musicians, that are trying, that are, how do you say, trying to fit a certain mold of musicians or voices that are more like famous or more marketable.
How do you mean?
I mean that you don't get to have like those truly original voices that we used to have back in the 40s and 50s and 60s.
Yeah, well, I agree. But I think that's intentional. I think that the unique individual, those voices are, most of those people are self taught. Nobody taught them, so they learned a new style. But today, it's kind of, it almost has a, you're saying they don't have that voice. And I think they like that. They don't have that personality. It's a different thing. They swing different. They play time different. Everything's different.
So, what's your advice for music students?
Well,
One advice for music students how to become who wants to be a professional musician.
I would. My only advice would be follow your passion. If like you said, people back in the 40s, 50s, 60s had unique voices. Well, if your passion is sounding like this, then follow that. If it's sounding like that, follow what your passion is. People ask me, who should I listen to? Who should I transcribe? I said, who do you like? You know, I mean, the players I liked, I, I couldn't live without them. All I wanted to do was listen to them and play like them, and you know, and gradually, if you have enough play, you start to get your own voice.
Right. So what part of your work do you like better, like playing or teaching?
Uh, it's like asking me, do I like sex or do I like talking about it? So I like playing.
Yeah. So what do you think you would be if you weren't a musician?
Well, let me finish answering that other question. Although teaching it is a great thing because you're talking about something that you love. So, and I learn a lot from my students because they have their pulse on the music of today. But um, what would I tell students today is, or how could they? It's all networking. It's being proactive and trying to get people to play with, and maybe getting a gig somewhere, going to get a club that you can play in, being proactive and things like that, and getting your name out there. Recording.
You told me that you don't really listen to your recordings.
Not after I record them, no.
Why is that?
It's like did it. Been there, did that. I'm onto something new. I I'm I'm thinking about some other stuff. And when I did it, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm done with that. If somebody asks, they'll say, "Man, I heard that record you did in 1994." To me, it's not even me. It's just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm polite, but it feels like that happened to me. It's not who I am.
Do you
It's
have like
a moment in time.
yeah? You have like a preferred combo, like a quartet or pianoless quartet or organ trio or
I, I love every one of those situations for different reasons. I love playing with piano players because that's what I grew up listening to, with quartets with piano players. But I love playing without piano players or guitar players. They asked Joe Henderson, Joe, how come you're making all these trio records now? And he said, on a clear day, you can see forever. Uh, Great line. So, yeah, but I like all those situations. Uh, Whichever one I'm put in, I I go with it.
do you have musicians that you haven't played with but you wished you had?
Yeah, I wish I had played with. I went in to sit in with. As a matter of fact, when I was on the road with Dave Brubeck, I got a call to join Elvin 3 times, and every time I'd get home, and this is before cell phones, I'd get my message machine. I was 2 weeks late, and so I went in to sit with him, sit in once, and Richie Byrack and Liebman were sitting in. So they didn't want anybody else in. But yeah, I wish I could play with Elvin. I wish I played with Billy Higgins and McCoy. But there's a lot of musicians that I wish I could have played with.
Let's talk about the future of jazz. We're seeing the audience that is getting like older.
Yeah,
What do you think of the future of jazz?
yeah. You know, sometimes I think that if they had somebody great marketing jazz, like in rock, they have all kinds of um, different names: grunge, heavy metal, this, that. Jazz, we only have a couple of names. It's too bad they can't get like a bunch of marketing geniuses to market uh, jazz and get some. But you know as much as I do about that. I don't know. Maybe we have to put some weird clothes on and you know whatever, some
Okay.
weird haircuts.
So Jerry, what are you listening to these days?
You know, let's see. Somebody just sent me this some cuts with a Woody Shaw CD that I had never heard. It was his audition CD for Blue Note, and they didn't take him. But I never heard these tractions with Joe Henderson, uh, Paul Chambers, Herbie Hancock. He's only sent me 3 tunes. I was listening to that recently. Sounds amazing. It's called Tetragon. It's before Joe Henderson recorded Tetragon. I think it was recorded in '65, and Woody's playing some amazing trumpet on there. I was listening to that. Um, I was listening to a Sonny Rollins CD that, called Standard Rollins, where there's very short tunes. They're all standards, and some of them are like 2 minutes long. Some are 4 minutes, but and I they don't. A lot of the tracks just fade out. I wish I could have heard the whole track, but there's some amazing playing in there. And then, uh,
Jerry, I'm sorry. Can you
oh,
just unfreeze
yep,
your
yep.
video?
And also, a friend of mine from France just sent me his CD. His name is Michael Elizon, and it's got some electronic stuff in it, and it's really modern and it's really captivating. So, a lot of times I'm listening to students that have sent me CDs, and I'm listening to it's really great stuff. Yeah.
Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about this strange era we're in,
Yeah.
this pandemic thing. How do you cope with it? How does it affect you?
Well, it probably affects me like everybody else. The good news is that I haven't had this much time to practice since I got out of college. So I'm practicing, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing that. And but there's no gigs. I had a weekly lily pad gig that's I was supposed to go to Europe 4 times this summer. Not happening. Supposed to play the Detroit Jazz Festival, cancel. I'm supposed to play with Levano with Birdland the end of November. I don't think that's going to happen. Uh, I it's like one day at a time. I can't believe it. I feel like I'm in some dystopian movie that it's oh, this is going to be over tomorrow, and it's still happening. I'm hoping that, like everybody else, that we have some great scientists in the world that are getting a handle on getting a vaccine together.
Right. Do, do you think that music has a role on a personal level or even on a society level, that musicians should, should or can do?
I think, well, first of all, with all this time that people have on their hands, much of it is spent listening to music, or watching TV. But a lot of it's listening to music, practicing, doing some new things. Uh, and I think people are resetting their spiritual values. What's important in life? Is it important that what's important to me? And art is so important for our life. And I think that it's putting a refocus on it in in a good way. And I think maybe when we all come out of this, it'll people will have a different perspective on things. But I see people are doing concerts online, happening all the time. They're even doing concerts from the Vanguard or small, no audience. Just like sports. Now they're doing sports with no audience. Basketball, baseball.
Right. Well, they have some audience at the basketball. You have those selected people are being screened.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I saw that. Yeah, I didn't know what that was. That's what it is. Okay.
It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody needs to
Well,
readjust.
how is life similar in Israel as it is in the United States? Is it as bad over there as it is over here?
Well, we had some. Right now, we're in the middle of the second spike of the pandemic. So things like the music venues, the clubs, which were open for, I think, 10 days or so, are now closed again.
Yeah.
But life, like stores, everything else is open.
What about restaurants?
Restaurants are open, but in a very limited way. Like open air restaurants, no more than I think 30 people, and some extra inside, like 20 people, and it's very everything is very complicated. I think here, no one really knows what we can or cannot do. Well, I
Yeah.
personally don't really understand, and it changes very, very rapidly. So I don't know. We're I don't know. It's it's very confusing. It's
Yeah.
very confusing times.
Very confusing here too. Nobody knows.
So Jerry, I want
Yeah.
to open up if there are any questions from from other people. I want to please raise your hand, and I'll let you ask some questions.
Please, please.
If not, I did some
Well, I see a
questions.
question right there. There's a
Yeah.
hand.
So let's see. Lonnie, I'm asking you to mute. Lonnie,
Yes.
you can speak.
Hi. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Uh, I started playing the trumpet 3 years ago, and I'm 62 today, so I don't really have time, as we say in Hebrew, for green bananas,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would love to have from you one gold rule or whatever to learn jazz. I started 3 years ago, but the jazz I started only this year. And I practiced a lot, and I tried to do all the chords and stuff and this and that, and I listen to a lot of music. But I find it very difficult to improvise myself. To copy other people, it's very easy. I mean, you just practice and it's there. if it's not too complicated. But how do you get the feel, you know, to like, it will be natural to even to do some simple improvisation.
Okay, I'll of course,
One gold rule.
think of rhythms and put notes to them.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, just think of a simple rhythm and do a repetitive rhythm and keep putting different notes to it. It's like going fishing, and it's like a 5 note rhythm, and you're going fishing. In the universe, I'm trying to pick out 5 notes to put to this rhythm.
Okay.
That's a fun exercise.
Jerry, can you unfreeze?
Yes, please. Cool.
Okay. Anyone else? Dorit, you have your hand raised.
It's not Dorit, it's Yaakov. It's just my wife's computer.
Okay.
But
Deja.
hello, Mr. Bergonzi. Thank you
Hi,
for having us talk
you.
with you. I also play. I play the tenor. You play the
Yep.
tenor, but we're worlds apart. I'm a dilettante, but I love it. It's been years on and off for various reasons. But the last 4 or 5 years have been really evolving. I mean, something came out. My bigger problem today is a question of technique. There's a group called the LA Super Saxes.
Yeah.
I suppose you're familiar with them. Now,
Yes.
they are playing at unlawful speeds.
Yeah.
They play very, very, very fast, yet they are very exact and clean.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think I will be able ever to play that fast, that clean, but is there something I can do to get a bit faster and cleaner? I mean, I take some passages which are written in, let's say, 16th,
Yeah.
and play them slowly and try to get on with a little quicker, a little faster. And at a certain point, everything goes berserk and nothing answers. So is there another technique that I could use to get a little better speed-wise?
Well, when I think of technique, just purely technique, what I did, because when I first moved to New York, everybody was like light years ahead of me, you know, and I said, oh my God, such technique. So I wrote a dozen, just 12 different scale sequences, 4-note sequences. Like, I'll play you a few of them. I'll play them slow, like or things like that, or and
This is slow.
I started real slow on the
Yes.
metronome at that time, because I haven't played with a metronome in 40 years. But at that time, I decided, okay, I'll play with a metronome, because people told me that was a good thing to do. But I did them religiously every day, and by the end of a year, from doing that every day, it was just like I didn't think about it. It just happened that my technique got better.
Okay.
So you get like little scale sequences. I would say 6 of them. 6. Do them every day. Don't think about and do them so you can play them in every key. Go as fast as the worst key. If the worst key is B or F sharp, which was always the most difficult keys because I have to use side B flat,
Yes.
then I would do them just as fast as that key.
Okay. I'll keep that
Now,
in mind. Thank you.
as far as improvising fast, that's a different headspace. Now I tell people, I say fire quick, fire quick. So what do they mean by fire quick? I say just play 5 notes. Da-ga-da-ga-da, but try to put some different shapes to the five notes. So I'm firing quick, fire, and I'm trying to come up with some different shapes and different, and that helps me, gets my brain, so I'm hearing quicker lines.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I did get something which I'll be doing tomorrow morning already.
Great.
Thank you very, very much.
Simple ones.
Thank you, Jacques. And now I'm going over to Nadav.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, Nadav.
Hey, how are
Hi.
you?
Fine, thank you.
So let me just say first that I really like your playing, and
Thank
I
you.
also really like your writing.
Thank you.
And I know that I didn't listen to all your albums actually, because you open Spotify and you go to Jerry Bergonzi and there's like dozens of them. I didn't count how much, but there's really a lot. So what I would like to ask is like, how do you balance your practice between playing the horn and writing? Because when I practice, I always tell myself, hey, I should write more, but I always find myself like gravitating to practice chops, transcribing, and like, how do you balance between these two?
That's a great question. Usually, I'm like you. I would gravitate toward practicing the saxophone and things like that. But at the end of the day, when I'm tired from playing the saxophone, I'd write. And the other thing too is I don't spend a lot of time with my compositions. They're little improvisations. So it takes me 15 minutes, 20 minutes to write a tune, or sometimes an hour. But if I sat there and try to write a perfect tune and spend 6 months with it, a lot of times I don't even like the tune after. So you could say, okay, I'm going to write every day. I'm going to do it in a half hour, or and just write. Don't care what comes out. Just write. That's a good way to do it. That way, because when you write, you're giving yourself a direction, something that you want to play, and etc. And yeah, that's a positive way of doing it.
Mm. Okay, thank you. That's a great
You're
question.
welcome.
Great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Right
Nadav.
with you though, I do think the same way you do.
So we're going to Daniel Rotem, whom you know, Jerry.
My friend.
There we are. Hey, Jerry. So
Hey
good.
man! Wow!
How are you?
How are you?
Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh wow! This is awesome to see you.
Yeah, man. So good to see you. And thank you, Barak and Raz and everybody involved in making this happen. This is really
Yeah.
wonderful to see. Jerry, we spoke many times about the topic you mentioned with many young musicians kind of sounding the same.
Yeah.
And I know there are many musicians here, but also many music lovers. And I was wondering if you have any advice or perspective on how musical communities from around the world can take actions to support the creation, to support the movement of this music going forward, both in terms of young musicians being able to express their visions, but also in terms of the music continuing to move forward.
The first thing that comes to mind is that there's so many amazing players in this world and so few listeners. So the first thing to do if you want to support this music is to listen to it. Go listen to your fellow musicians play. Even if they're not your favorite players, go check them out. Because every time you're putting your ear, your consciousness on somebody's music, it's lifting it up. And it's so spiritual. And it would be great if we had a couple of a few Bill Gateses or whatever to invest in creative music because
Mhm.
it's spiritual. But until that time, it's all us, and and all the energy. I was reading a quote from. I'm gonna see if I can pull it up. It was a Edgar Casey quote,
Mm.
and he says there is so much good in the worst of us, and so much bad in the best of us. It doesn't behoove any of us to speak evil of the rest of us. You know, so you listen to music
Mm.
and just say, yeah, that's what they're playing. It's cool. You know, be a
Totally.
positive force for everybody else, and it's going to help the music industry.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, that's
Yeah,
that's
Daniel.
beautiful. And maybe we'll take one last question, and then we'll say good night for us to Jerry and listen to another song of him as a closure. Anyone else want to ask? Okay, so wait, Lonnie again. Okay, that's the last question.
Okay.
If we have another question, we'll take that. If not, we'll go to Lonnie. Go ahead, Lonnie. Where are you? Did we lose you? Okay. And so closing this conversation. Wait, there is Lonnie again.
Yes. Last question.
Sure.
When I started to play the trumpet, I started with a teacher that was more like classical, and then I played also the jazz style. And I found my tone, the voice is not as clear as it was when I was playing classic. Like it's is it that I find my way of playing jazz, or it's the way of playing jazz is killing the clear tone when you play classic? You know what I mean? Or it was too
Yeah.
complicated?
No, well, it's interesting you say that. People say, well, all the saxophone, the people sound alike today. Everybody's classically trained today. They have amazing techniques um, where a lot of times in the 30s and 40s and 50s, people were self taught. They didn't have classical music lessons. But, the trumpet is a beast of an instrument. It's a beast. So,
Tell
I
me
mean,
about it.
if you could get a classical trumpet player who teach you the right way to play that beast, I would say do it.
This is what I'm doing today. I mean, I go once a week to classical and once a week to jazz.
Yeah, that sounds like a
That's it.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but I find sometimes that my voice is a bit, it's not as clear as it was at the beginning. It's like I'm
yeah,
losing it, the clear tone.
yeah,
Maybe I find my own tone. I don't know.
yeah. Well, that's going to happen anyway. Everybody's going to find their own sound.
Okay.
All
Thanks
right,
a lot.
Lonnie. You're welcome.
Guys, Jerry, I want to thank you for
I thank
spending
all
this
of you.
time with us.
Fellow musicians, Barak, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your jazz society here. And Daniel, love you, man. And
I really hope we'll be able to see you live somewhere around the world. And after this COVID-19 things
yeah,
will be over, we'll find an engine or whatever. Anyways, we're gonna close this conversation with a standard from Jerry's last album. I chose that standard, not Jerry.
okay.
It's on Green Dolphin Street.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, guys, thank you very much,
Thank
everybody,
you.
and enjoy the rest of the evening. Jerry, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Well, that's it for now. Guys, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Barak.
spending your time here. Jerry, thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here. We
Thank you.
really appreciate that. And we talk soon.
Okay. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.